So paying attention to the environment is just as important as breathing. When you hear a yell in the environment, right, and it's becoming repetitive, or you hear a dish drop, this is when you know you have to get from under the tree. When you see a branch that's under the tree, right, like a baby shedding of a wig, or just a little branch, you should be expecting that the entire tree is going to fall within the next year, so you don't sit under it. Now, when you see groundhogs, right, and this is going into my passion and love for Pokemon. I wasn't so much a fan of Dragon Ball Z because the characters were kind of human morphic. They wasn't creature morphic. I love creatures. I really don't take part in humanology to the point where it becomes about identifying culture. Like when you first understand the culture of Bantuism, or you first understand the culture of Cushitic, right? You love it, but after a while it becomes like, okay, I don't really want the lamb and the rice with the banana, I'll just take the banana. You see what I'm saying? I don't want the chapati and the milk, I'll just take a vanilla sherbet, you know what I mean? Like, you'll do that. So the groundhog, it symbolizes an involvement of, or you can say devolvement, right? But it symbolizes the evolution of the Wolverine, and a person who looks like a badger, like a groundhog, right? To me, and I equate creature morphing with NBA players, right? Because they're the most visible and they're the most entertaining. I equate the groundhog with like a Al Jefferson, right? He's not going to foul you on the play. You know what I mean? He's going to really focus on offense because he knows it's really not about winning at the end of the day unless you're judging it on a person's value system, right? He wants to show people that, he's the only player who can do offensive moves at his position. Like, if you were saying Al Jefferson and not saying Kevin Garnett, that says a lot about skill set. When you talk about skill set, Al Jefferson is past Kevin Garnett. Kevin Garnett just has a motor, you know what I mean? And he has an intensity, but he's not as skilled as Al Jefferson. He's not. Al Jefferson can pump fake at his size. He can take it off the dribble. He can bank it off the backboard. He can do mid-range. His best move is his hook shot, his touch around the rim. And he always aims for the net. He don't aim for the backboard. We know Kevin Garnett for the 15-footer, the 20-footer. We know Tim Duncan for the backboard bank, like he's banking it off the backboard. Not the most choreographed, not the most, he's entertaining, but he's not the most like eye-popping, you know what I mean? He doesn't give you that Popeyes moment, Al Jefferson does. But Al Jefferson, right, he wasn't mentioned with the greats. He really wasn't, They just knew like he can put up 20 and 10. That's all they knew. And I look at this generation's Al Jefferson as being Vooch for the Chicago Bulls. I look at him as being the Al Jefferson. So going back to creature morphism, you know, the groundhog being the Wolverine, right? They dig with their claws into the dirt. There's a hole over there. They come out every second, which means they're constantly digging that hole deeper, you know? And, you know, while they're digging that hole deeper, right, they dig other holes. They're constantly using their claws. You see, so I equate that with Wolverine. You know, Wolverine is not only the human morph, but, you know, the animal morph, right? The creature morph. Because, you know, Michigan is known for Wolverines. It's not known for deers. It's known for Wolverines. So, like, these badgers, right, they're just as effective as Wolverines. They can claw their way through holes, you know? And it goes with the boron being in the knuckles, you know? You always have trace elements or trace minerals like the boron, the copper, the nickel. That's in their knuckles, you know? So they're able to dig into things, you know what I mean? So, and another analogy, right, about basketball players. I'll close out with a guard analogy, right, because we just saw the Lance Stephenson and Michael Beasley game, and I thought Lance Stephenson was going to win, because, like, a person at his size, right, 6'7", right, can handle the rock, extremely aggressive, right, extremely aggressive. He's way more aggressive than Michael Beasley. Probably not as strong because Michael Beasley, he's a prototype forward. He's not a small forward. He's not a power forward. He's a prototype forward, meaning he can do everything that Tim Duncan can do, plus more on the perimeter. But he can't out-defense Tim Duncan. That's the thing. That's why he didn't make it in the league, because they knew, like, defense was going to be an issue. And if you're constantly barking at the referees, they're going to say, like, you know, do we really want this personality on our team? You know, this is why it didn't work out for Stephon Marbury. You know, he went overseas. It didn't work out for Latrell Sprewell. It didn't work out for Jerry Stackhouse. So, like, when you see prototype forwards, right, you think of Tayshaun Prince, you think of Michael Beasley, and like a third tier, you think of Antoine Jameson. But your best guard combo, right, for this generation, right, it's easily the most, I wouldn't say that. I would say the most prolific, the most one who had the entire potential, right? It was Lance Stephenson. He could have been better than Derrick Rose if he wanted to be, right? Because, like, you look at his game, he's more polished than Shea Alexander. He's way more polished. But given his roster turn, right, his roster contracts, you know, the players he played with, you know what I mean? Like, they didn't make the floor as good for him, you know what I mean? Like, you're either going to perform or you're not going to perform. That's why this new prospect, right, he didn't show up for the NBA draft. They're saying he's going to drop. But, like, if you saw him on tape at the collegiate level, the high school level, right, he shouldn't drop. You know what I mean? Because, like, every lottery pick is a risk. You know, their upside is valued at what they could bring, not what they will bring. So, you know, Lance Stephenson easily could have averaged, you know, 27 and 8 against Dwayne Wade if he wanted to. 27 and 8. You know, everybody knew he was going to be phenomenal in high school. He probably had the most trilogy behind him than any player that came out of high school. They called him Born Ready, right? But when he got to Cincinnati, right, he became a Bearcat. You know, I don't think he liked it being outside of New York. You know what I mean? I don't think he liked it that. I don't think he liked being outside of like what brought players to Lincoln High School. I don't think he liked it that. But like, you know, I when I name my roster, I give my 5, right? I'm putting Rajon Rondo at the 1. My 6th man is Baron Davis. My shooting guard is going to be Ray Allen. My small forward is going to be Andrei Kirilenko. My forward, right, my power forward is going to be Al Jefferson. My center is going to be Dirk Nowitzki. Flat out. I know Andrei Kirilenko is going to play defense. I know Rajon Rondo is going to play defense. Ray Allen, Dirk Nowitzki, Al Jefferson, they're going to put up buckets. That's a fantasy roster. Old school term, right? Old school. Wes Unseld at the 4, Bill Russell at the 5. Dominique Wilkins at the 3, Clyde Drexler at the 2. Nate Archibald at the 1. Period. Bill Russell, he getting all shots pinned to the backboard. Nate Archibald, he going in, he scoring, you know, he dishing it. Wes Unseld, he throwing outlets, you know. Clyde Drexler, obviously, you know, he's going to make it easy on both ends. Dominique Wilkins, monster athleticism. You know, you need athleticism when it comes to making the offense anxious. You know, if he's on your 3 and your 2 and your 1, you know, they're going to be turning the ball over every time. You know, so great piece, Jakob.